We're here at FreedomFest 2023 once again. I'm sitting here with Connor Boyack. Connor, welcome.
Thank you, appreciate it.
So what brings you to FreedomFest?
So we come here pretty much every year. We actually launched our Tuttle Twins books at FreedomFest back in 2014. So I call it kind of the family reunion of the freedom movement. You see all those, uncles and aunts that you haven't seen in the last year, and a lot of them are old and they kind of talk about weird things sometimes, but it's nice to see the family and, check that box that like, okay, I went to the family reunion.
Yeah. Well, okay, so we're sitting here as family because this is my fourth.
Yeah, okay.
So
brother, cousin, we'll call you a cousin.
Tuttle Twins. Tell everybody about Tuttle Twins.
So, okay, for those who don't know, the Tuttle Twins is a series of children's books that teach the ideas of human flourishing to the rising generation, things like personal responsibility, the golden rule, entrepreneurship, private property rights, natural rights, and things like that. We have books from toddlers through teens, so we've got all kind of age ranges. We've sold over 5 million copies of the books. We're in about a dozen languages now. And now we also have a cartoon as well. We're in season 2 of production with Angel Studios of our Tuttle Twins TV show. All of that is free to watch on the Angel Studios app. Really, we're just trying to empower parents to have a lot of resources where they can have conversations with their kids about some of these ideas and talk about, hey, what does it mean to have respect for others? What does it mean to have respect for myself and autonomy for myself and all these things? Parents don't really know how to talk to their kids about that. And so they don't, which means those kids grow up hearing stuff from TikTok and teachers and other things like that.
Yep.
We want to empower parents to have those conversations at the dinner table and raise their children right.
Fantastic. That's not the only thing you do, though, right?
No, yeah, I do a lot of other stuff. My main day job is I run a think tank, Libertas Institute. We're a think tank in Utah, but now we work all over the country doing public policy, legal reform. We've changed over 100 laws. About a dozen of them were the first of their kind in the whole country. So we do a lot of just traditional think tank type of work to get laws changed.
Yeah, I heard you in person or in a meeting explain the sandbox idea.
Yeah.
Can you tell everybody about that a little bit?
Sure. So it's called a regulatory sandbox. Imagine I'll use a silly example. So in my state, like in several other states, Elon Musk was prohibited by law from selling Teslas because Tesla's business model is a direct-to-consumer model, not going through the dealerships. And over the decades, the car dealers had all gotten political control through their buddies and their campaign donations to get the laws to say you have to sell cars through car dealerships. So of course, someone like Elon could hire all the lawyers and all the lobbyists to go steamroll and get that fixed. And he did, which is why everyone can buy Teslas all over the place. But what about the little guy? What about someone who, at the kitchen table on the back of the napkin is like, hey, I've got a cool business idea. He goes and researches it and turns out that's illegal, right? Because of some 28-year-old regulation on the books. He doesn't have money for lawyers. He doesn't have money for lobbyists. So Regulatory Sandbox is a program where someone like that can apply for a waiver for up to 2 years to be shielded from any law or regulation that stands in the way of their innovative business model or product or service, so that they can go to market or they can develop some data to show policymakers and say, hey, look, I've been operating under this environment where that regulation, doesn't apply. No one's been hurt. No one's been defrauded. No one's sued us. There's no harm. Hey, can we go get that repealed or amended to minimize it or something like that? So it's a way to go out and build evidence for why we need deregulation by allowing these entrepreneurs to go innovate out in the marketplace.
And it's been adopted in Utah?
Yeah, so we've got it in Utah, and 2 other states have the big model policy for any industry. It's called an all-inclusive regulatory sandbox, so no matter what industry you're in. And then about a dozen other states we've helped pass industry-specific sandboxes, say for agriculture or financial technology or things like that. And that's often the strategy. They'll start with 1 or 2 industries first, play with that for a year or 2, and if the legislature likes it, they'll expand it to the entire economy.
Very good, very good. So, Connor, we're having discussions with people here today largely about this values quadrant idea, which I'll get to more in a moment.
Yep.
The discussions are designed to be had mostly with non-libertarians. We want to expose them to a new way of thinking and observing the world. In fact, we started pioneering and testing this with our partners at the Advocates for Self-Government. They have something called the Human Respect Test. And when people take the Human Respect Test, based on the ideas I'm going to be sharing with you here today, it's just a portion of them. When they take that Human Respect Test, regardless of where they're at, ideologically, progressive, conservative, libertarian, whatever, total, cumulative, all of them, 80% of the people who finish that say, we don't want coercion. That's a pretty significant.
That is significant.
Yeah. So it's based on this philosophy I'm going to share with you. And what I'd like to do, since you are a libertarian, I want to share it with you as I would talk to a non-libertarian. I'd like to give you some of the elements of it so you can see how what we're talking about and how it applies. And our conversation is largely about personal values versus social ethics. So most people have a lean in their personal values. They tend to be a little bit more progressive or a little bit more conservative, right? Even libertarians, when I'm talking to them, have a little sometimes have a lean one direction or the other. You know, I think there's a libertarian type, but you know, you see a lot of that, right?
I agree.
And so what we want to have a conversation with them about is, you know, in fact, I let them know up front, we're not trying to change your values, right? That's off the table. You be you. Right.
Sure.
So if you're more on the conservative side, you keep being conservative. We need more people like you. You have good values. Go live your values. Go live your life. Believe what you believe and continue to be you. Okay. That's not going to be. I'm not going to try to change your mind on that. But I want to have a conversation with them about making our values and our ethics consistent.
Okay.
Right? Values are personal. This is how I see the world. These are the things I care about. These are the things that motivate and move me. My personal values. But ethics is a social question. It's how we interact with one another, how we get along, and how we get things done. So if we see a social problem, how do we address it? Do we end up addressing it through persuasion, which is what we want to talk about here today, or does it look more like coercion, which is normally what the Democrats and Republicans sell to progressives and conservatives respectively?
For sure.
Okay? So usually the first question I ask people, and I'll ask you to play along with me here, usually the first question I ask is, do you want to be happy?
Okay, so I'm answering this, let's say, as a Republican, non-libertarian.
We'll get to that in a minute. Just be you for a moment, because I think these questions are kind of universal.
All right, be me. Ask the question again.
Do you want to be happy?
I do.
Okay. Do you believe everyone else wants to be happy?
Yes.
Do you think that this is a primary value?
Yes.
Okay. Now, let me ask you 3 quick questions. If violence was used against you, somebody initiated violence, would you be happier or less happy?
Less happy.
All the time?
Yes.
Okay. If someone stole from you or defrauded you or vandalized your property, would you be happy or less happy?
Less happy all the time.
All the time. Okay. Do you believe that the people walking around this exhibitor hall are any different? Do you think, in other words, would they answer the questions the same way you just did?
For sure.
Okay. So the fact that we have something that's pretty universal, everybody wants to be happy, and every time these particular actions occur, we see the same response from people, that begins to give us a hint that there might be a principle at work here, right? Maybe we could discover the principle.
Yep.
Now the principle, there's a couple different definitions for principle, so I want to be clear about what we mean by principle here. Most people, when they use the word principle, they mean like a moral principle, a personal value that they hold in high regard, right? They may have a variety of values about things, but there's some things that are just extremely important to their conscience. They will always do something or they will never do something, right? So that's one type of principle, and it's a very, very important one. We'll probably touch on it at the end. But the type of principle we're talking about here is the more traditional definition of it, the one that Isaac Newton used when he came up with the idea of gravity, right? Okay. If I'm holding onto a pen here and I let it goes where?
Down.
Yes. And you don't need to know the formula to know that that's the truth,
Outcome,
right?
Yeah.
Everybody understands it without knowing exactly how it works.
Self-evident.
All right. Social principles aren't always necessarily quite as observable, but they're still nevertheless true, which I hope to illustrate to you. Okay, and part of the reason for that is we don't actually have to carry out all these social principles. Sometimes we delegate stuff to others, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. Okay, so the principle that we're here to talk about today is the natural principle of human respect. And it says that any time violence is initiated against you, anytime you're stolen from or defrauded, your happiness, harmony, and prosperity will decline, always. How often?
Always?
Always, okay? So that's why we know it's a principle. It'll always happen, okay? So for this next part, let me just pause.
Okay.
Now we're gonna get to the part where I'm gonna ask you to do a tiny bit of role playing.
Alrighty.
I'm gonna need you to pick whether or not you wanna be a progressive or a conservative.
I'll be a conservative.
Okay, good. And I want you to pick an issue that the progressives are imposing upon you. You really resent the fact that they are imposing it on you.
Let's see, what would a conservative say that progressives are imposing? I'm gonna say higher taxes.
Okay, higher taxes, very good. Okay, so the Democrats want to increase your taxes, Connor. How do you feel about that?
I hate it.
Why?
Because it's my money, I want to keep it.
What would you do with that money instead?
Go on a vacation with my family and create some amazing memories.
Okay, but the progressives believe that they're taking care of welfare, and some other things, right? That they're using that money for some things that might even be more noble than a vacation, right?
Yeah, but it's my money that they're taking to benefit other people, so they're trying to help other people at my own expense. For them to supposedly be happy, I have to be unhappy.
Okay. Now, this is going to be a little bit hard, but I want you to think about something here very specifically. Like, try to be them for just a little moment. Do you think that their intentions are good? That they want to do good things, and that's why they're proposing increased taxes?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, I'm sure there's exceptions of people who are just evil and miserable, but generally speaking, I think progressives want what's good for society. They want good kind of equal outcomes. They want everyone to have prosperity. They just don't know how to get there, and the means that they advocate to get there, I find to be quite odious. But I think what they're trying to ultimately achieve is good. They're just confused and ignorant as to how to accomplish that.
Okay, all right. So let's see if we can help out their ignorance. Why do you think? What are some of the reasons? Pick one. What's a good reason why they want to raise your taxes? What do they think they're going to accomplish because of that?
They're going to increase welfare for people who are at a lower socioeconomic status, so that they can get kind of a boost up and try and level the playing field.
And you can understand why they would want to do that, right?
I can understand why they would want to help people move up the playing field. What I don't understand is why they think it's okay to take people who are a little bit further and push them down in order to bring those people up. But I do recognize that it's a good thing to want people at a lower status to move up.
So let's be creative here. I want you to give them some advice. You said they were ignorant, so ignorance is a curable condition. I want you to give them a little bit of advice. What could they do other than turn to the politicians, take the money from you in the form of taxes? What could they do differently to address those problems?
Well, I think of Alexis de Tocqueville, who talked about when he came through early America and was touring everything, he talked about how there were all these mediating institutions. There were basically civic organizations, fraternal organizations, where when people had a need, an immigrant coming across that had literally like $5 and that's all, people could band together and help. To me, that's an America that's like, we're taking care of one another, we're helping, no one's dying in the street, but everyone's kind of voluntarily doing it, and no one's like pointing a gun at someone and saying, give me your money so I can go give it to this guy over here. So what I would tell my progressive friends is it's fine to want to help the poor. We just have to do that of our own charity, and then try and persuade others to join in that charitable effort, rather than go around and threaten everyone with jail time if they don't throw money into the fund to help those people.
Right. So Alexis de Tocqueville, you're quoting Alexis de Tocqueville here in our conversation. I'm guessing that's some Tuttle Twin stuff right there, right?
Well, I may have deviated from my role playing because I don't know that most conservatives would answer that way. So
They may. I think there's a lot of conservatives that would actually do that. I was at an event here last month that was very conservative, and they quoted Alexis de Tocqueville.
Cool.
More than once.
Yeah. Good.
Okay. So that phase of our discussion, Connor, we're back out of the role play mode.
All right, good.
You're not a conservative anymore.
You need to put a banner over that part of the video and say, this is not really what Connor believes and thinks, so, in case it leaks out. And
Duly noted.
In case someone clips it on Instagram.
So that was an attempt for them to feel the coercion that's being used against them. And I will always say to them at this point, now you can see the principle at work, right? Your happiness was interfered with by having your money taken away. Your harmony in all these cases was instantly destroyed with that person. You didn't feel connection with them anymore. You felt rivalry. You felt maybe even anger at them for having done that to you. And in the case of having your money taken away from that, directly affected your prosperity.
Right.
So you could see the gravitational pull of this natural principle, right? Mm-hmm. Your happiness, harmony, and prosperity went down because they were taxing you.
Right.
Right. Then next, I flipped the script on them. We walk through an exercise where they have a policy that they're imposing, because we have a survey that you filled out here at the beginning. You answered all zeros, this is why it doesn't work. But they have some policies they want politicians to enact, and we want them to now feel the position they just felt. We want them to start to empathize with the other side, and we want them to tell the other side, give advice as to how they could do things creatively so that they're not oppressing them now, right? And so they can begin to feel that, and then we can get them to also understand how the principle applies consistently.
Yeah.
Now, when we get to the end of these discussions, what we find most of the time is that people would like to reduce the amount of coercion. And we consider that a success. Like maybe, for example, they'll say something like, well, I still think we need government to do some things, but you know what, when we sit down, we probably should have a discussion about maybe coming up with a more creative solution first. Or maybe we should narrowly tailor whatever our solution is so that it minimizes the amount of force that's used and leaves more room for voluntary cooperation or innovation to be a part of the mix. And those are good answers. Those go a long way, and we're happy to hear them. That's progress, right?
Of course.
I would love it if every time the politicians sat down, they start off with those premises. That would be a big improvement.
Yeah.
But it's not enough. We're going for the principle. We want people who will who will adopt, who will see the natural principle that happiness, harmony, and prosperity always declines when we initiate violence, when we steal from one another, like happens with taxation. We want them to see that and say, well, now that I recognize that that's a principle, I won't participate in that at all. I won't do anything to support that. I said earlier that sometimes the social principles, we don't see them in action because in the case of government, we end up delegating that to other agents to do the dirty work for us.
Right.
We don't see the force, so we're not aware of the consequence necessarily, but the consequence is there, and we want people to notice it and feel it and understand it. So we're looking for people at the end of the day who want to adopt a moral principle of human respect, where they say, you know what, now that I understand that happiness, harmony, and prosperity goes down when theft or violence are initiated, I'm not going to do that anymore. I personally will never do that. I won't vote for it, I won't support it, I won't endorse it, I won't speak for it. I'm not going to do those things, right? So now I have one final question I want to ask you. I know this is not the first time you've heard this, because the gentleman that devised this approach, you've met with him several times. But having heard and seen this, and I'll give you a copy of this before you go to take with you, but having seen this approach now and heard what we've had to say here, does it have any impact on how you would share your libertarian message?
Well, I think calling it human respect, I think, is a new term that a lot of us aren't using in the libertarian movement, right? And I think we talk about social ethics a little bit and why persuasion is important. I tend to more call myself a voluntarist than a libertarian or a minarchist, just because it throws people off, and they're like, what the heck is a voluntarist?
Okay.
And then it allows me to say, hey, I think everything should be done through voluntary exchange and persuasion.
Yes.
So I see that as kind of synonymous. Your efforts have this term, which I like. I agree with it. I like voluntarist, but we're all communicating the same thing because I'm also trying to get them to that same principle. I agree with what you said towards the beginning. I think most people have a disconnect between their personal values and their social ethics. They'll believe in certain behavior for themselves and their family, but they have no problem delegating to a third party to act in a manner totally inconsistent with how they would do it themselves.
Yes,
right?
yes.
It's this Jeffersonian, like, you only have power to do against your neighbor that you
would do yourself.
The government only has power that you would have to do against your neighbor, right? Or that you can morally do to your neighbor. So I think our efforts, I see it in parallel, really boil down to trying to get people to better apply those personal values to their social ethics using terms like this so that people can see, oh, I guess I do need to be consistent. I guess I can't compartmentalize my personal values over here and then just vote for whatever I want and do whatever I want in the government. Right. There is a connection between the two. I'm very Christian. And so for me, I approach this from a religious angle too, where I say, look, Jesus taught the golden rule. It doesn't have any asterisks on it. It doesn't say, here's the list of
There's
exceptions.
no fine print.
Right. It's like, do unto others as you would, and so the same questions you asked me, do you like when people, assault you and violate? Like, of course not. So I shouldn't be doing that to other people, and there's no exceptions to the golden rule, which many other major religions have taught, not just Jesus. But there's no exceptions for, like, well, if it's a politician, or, oh, if a majority vote for it, and, oh, if it's a ballot initiative, like, none of that, right? It's like, you have to be consistent in all of your public behavior with the same principles that you're cultivating for your private life. Most people don't think that way, and I think that is the core problem that we're up against, so I really like this for that reason.
Yeah, and by the way, for whatever it's worth, Chris calls himself a voluntarist. I call myself a voluntarist. Human respecter is kind of a strange phrase, but a voluntarist practices human respect.
Agreed.
Right? A voluntarist believes that all of our relationships should be ones that we chose, and we should have the opportunity to exit if we don't want that, and that includes our government, right?
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay, well, Connor Boyack with the Tuttle Twins, thanks for sitting down with us.
Thank you, appreciate it.